Britain is a country that owes a great deal to its rail empire. For 100 years, the railways dominated the development of this country, the network that supported a global superpower. But today, our island is home to 10,000 miles of disused lines, a silent network of embankments, platforms and viaducts. For me and many others, they've become a perfect platform for exploring the country on foot. Hello and welcome to a brand new series. I've got my walking boots on again and I'm hoping that the rain is going to hold off. All of my outdoor adventures over the next 6 weeks have got one very specific goal. Each week I'll be setting off to explore one of Britain's hundreds of disused railway lines. This is an adventure that will take me right across the country, from picturesque spots to urban back streets, mountains to coastlines. All my disused lines have a unique story to tell. And with a spot of help from our helicopter cameraman, we'll be able to get a unique aerial perspective every step of the way. To kick things off, I've come to an area close to where I grew up, the Peak District in Derbyshire. This is Peak Rail, one of the country's many steam heritage lines. Today it attracts over 40,000 visitors a year, and most of those are tourists. But once upon a time, this route was filled with buxom, busy express trains. Almost 140 years ago, Victorian railway engineers were set the unlikely task of creating a main line between London and Manchester that ran straight through these twisting valleys and rocky hills. Today, that same route is a favourite for walkers, climbers, and those just seeking to escape the surrounding hubbub of the Midlands. I'm following a line today that cuts right through the heart of the peaks, through its geology, through its history, through everything. I'm trying to find out why on earth anyone would choose to build a main railway line through this landscape. My walk today is known as the Monsell Trail, an 8-mile route from Bakewell almost as far as Buxton. And this popular walk owes its existence to the Midland Railway. In 1867, they completed their line from London to Manchester. It became part of Britain's booming rail empire. In 1914, this was how the country's rail map looked. But after World War II, when the railways were nationalised, the situation went into reverse. To date, Britain has lost an incredible 10,000 miles of railway. But just like the Monsell Trail, many of those miles are perfect for a day out on foot. So that's the map. But before I set off, let's take a closer look at the route I'll be following. Leaving Bakewell, I'll head north across rolling farmland, dominated by the local estates of Hassop Hall and Chatsworth House. Turning west, the railway headed to the village of Great Longston, once with its very own station, a facility shared with neighbouring Thornbridge Hall. The drama of the Wye Valley soon takes over, and for the Midland Railway, this meant building the glorious Monsell Viaduct. At Cressbrook Village, I'll follow the riverside path for a while, whilst the railway disappears deep under the Derbyshire hills. Rejoining the old line at Lytton Mill, I'll follow it on a straight run to the unusual double viaduct at Millersdale. This is now limestone country. Old quarries are obvious amongst the hills as the Wye Valley gets deeper and enters the gorge at Cheadale. The end of my walk is simply stunning. a dramatic natural corridor through rock and a junction where trains from London turned either to Buxton or to Manchester. This quiet rural ending once rumbled with the sound of locomotives, a fitting end to my first railway walk. Back in Bakewell, my walk starts in a small industrial estate on the outskirts of town. Why here? Well, this was Bakewell Station, of course, and it's where I'm meeting Christian Wolmer, one of the country's leading authors on transport history. How much did the arrival of the railway change Bakewell?
No, I mean, this gave people access to St Pancras, just 2.5 hours away, and Manchester about 3/4 of an hour away. The railway transformed places like Bakewell from sleepy little towns into bustling places that were really part of the Victorian world. For example, I've got this book on the Bakewell show, and this shows the trains in the 1950s, and there's 22 extra trains just within a few hours in the morning from places like Leicester and Manchester and Newcastle and all that. Just they brought in 40,000 people to this
Shipping
Bakewell
them
show.
in.
So without the railway, that was completely impossible.
It does seem a pretty strange idea, though, in the first place, to try and run a rail network through the peaks, through the Peak District. You know, why that plan?
Yes, the railway wasn't built like it would be today, with the government saying, let's build a railway line there and basically getting planning permission to do it. It was really built by competing railway companies who would try and outdo each other. The Midland wanted to have its own line through to London. That was the absolute crucial point. And so it decided to build a line, and it had to find somewhere to build it, and the Peak District seemed a fairly obvious place to do it. Of course, it gave a fantastic scenic route.
Why did the line close? It was so important to Bakewell.
Well, in the 1950s and the 1960s, British Railways was losing a lot of money, and the government appointed a certain Dr. Richard Beeching to be in charge of the railways, and he produced his famous report, which was called Reshaping of Britain's Railways, and he decided that basically about half the railways should shut down, and several thousand stations as well, and this was one of them.
Now, I suspect on my railway walks across this series, I'm probably going to encounter quite a few Beeching enemies.
Yes, well, Beeching did cut a lot of railways, but, you know, there is one advantage. They've given us fantastic walks.
Which is good for me.
Absolutely.
And so my first railway walk begins. As the line heads north, I enter an area of fine country estates. The Dukes of Devonshire and Rutland were both keen to make use of the new railway, so long as it didn't upset the tranquility of their country seats. Up the road from here, though, the Devonshires of Chatsworth always had the protection of being a good couple of miles from the line. You can just catch a glimpse through those trees of another fine Derbyshire country manor, and I'm sure it's got perfectly landscaped gardens. That is Thornbridge Hall. There's been a private estate here outside the village of Great Longston since the 1100s. In the past 200 years, it's passed through the hands of several entrepreneurs, many of whom have been keen to emulate nearby ducal estates, acquiring panelling, household items, and even a fountain from the likes of Clumber Park and Chatsworth. But unlike the Duke of Devonshire, the owners of Thornbridge Hall had the advantage of being right next to the railway line. This actually feels like a real railway station. You almost want to look behind you because you half expect a train to be coming. But at Great Longston, it's the building next door to the station that raises a few questions. It was once part of Thornbridge Hall, so who better to ask than the present owner of the Thornbridge estate and a local businessman, Jim Morrison. What on earth is this magnificent building doing plonked right next door to a pretty ordinary-looking railway station?
It was the idea of one George Jobson Marples, and having built the hall across the road, he decided he'd build himself a railway station.
Built himself a railway station?
Oh, yes. He didn't want to mix with the ordinary folk.
So this man was quite a dude in his day?
He was indeed. He made lots and lots of money in steel and being a barrister, and decided to move out to Derbyshire and be a bit of a gentleman.
So what was his thinking behind this building? That he just didn't want to walk, how, 500 yards?
What is it? What is it, 200-300 yards away?
Yeah.
He didn't want to go to the little ordinary station down there, so he thought he'd build himself something here where his staff could come, but he could actually pull his carriages up through the entranceway there,
Yeah.
and he could get out at his leisure, wait in his waiting rooms, and then move the train just a few yards up so he could get on personally.
Now, you've got some pictures of him.
So
Let's see how
here
handsome he was.
This is a picture of one of Marples's weekend parties where he's got all his friends around for a shooting party.
Yeah.
You see them all posing with their guns, and this is the man himself.
No, he's not a great looker, is
No.
he? But he's got something about him. It's been a bit of a toe-to-toe haul.
That's the man.
Lots of ladies in there as well.
Yes. Well, he's one of his girlfriends could have been in there because he had quite a number, apparently. He's a bit of a lad.
And let's have a look at the building itself.
So that's the building as it was being put up. These are all the builders and his foremen who were running the thing for him.
And look at the builders in the day. I mean, they were posh. They were almost wearing dicky bows.
Oh, yes, they've all got ties and hats on.
In relation to the actual railway, how do we date this building?
It's probably about 30 to 40 years after the railway came by. This was put up as recently as 1900. It may look a lot older, but he was copying an older style.
Oh, lovely. Well, I wonder if you don't mind, will you take me down to the station platform?
Sure, absolutely.
And we
Let's
can
go.
imagine how it would have been for George and his ladies
Yes.
in that day.
Off we go.
So he actually got the train to stop there and then here.
That's right. That's right. Just a few hundred yards, not even that.
Right. Well, I'm going to go a few hundred yards that way.
OK.
Jim, thank you very much. Oh,
Nice to meet you.
nice to meet you. Thanks
care.
for telling me all about Mr. Marple.
It's been a pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Cheerio.
With 2 stations past, my walk reaches a point where it begins to change in character. The gently rolling fields begin to run out as the gritstone of Bakewell turns into classic Peak District limestone. And for the railway, that required some serious engineering. The peaks between here and Buxton meant that this part of the Midland Railway included 6 tunnels. Now, who wants to walk through long, dark tunnels when you've got all this splendid national park around you? Well, nobody, but I felt to really understand the history of this railway walk that I should. So I picked the longest one and I phoned one of the National Park's wardens. Steve, I said, will you hold my hand? Hi, Steve.
Hi, Julia.
Thank you
Nice
for
to
showing
see
me
you.
the dark side. I need this, I
You
suppose.
certainly do. From now on in, there could be some loose rocks.
Ah, right, OK. I shall follow your lead then.
Very good.
The Headstone Tunnel is sadly closed off to the everyday walker. The odd guided tour takes place, but for the most part, it is a dark and silent world, largely untouched since Dr. Beeching's axe came down.
So obviously, we don't go straight into the tunnel, Steve.
No, we have a cutting first, and then we reach the tunnel.
It's very beautiful, Steve. It's a shame that not everybody could do this, of course.
No, but you can see we've got rocks like this one, which do occasionally come down, so that's the reason that the general public aren't allowed in.
That's
usually.
a beauty. Now, you're not telling me my hard hat's going to help, Steve.
I don't think it would have helped very much with that one, no.
Imagine, though, if the trains are running and something of that size fell onto the track. I mean, it would be disaster.
That would have caused some problems, and I'm sure there were chaps in here who checked it daily to make sure they weren't on the track.
The cutting gets deeper and deeper as you walk further into the new limestone surroundings. But as the hills got higher, the builders of the Midland Railway were left with only one course of action.
And there she is, up ahead.
The tunnel.
The tunnel, boys. Wow,
There we go, Headstone Tunnel.
it's big. Ooh. Steve, do me the honours. Ta-da! Hey, presto. And how long is it?
We've got 533 yards to walk.
Right, we better get going. In the dark. And these are presumably little cubby holes, just to...
That's where the men working on the line would have had to stand out of the way when the trains came through.
The thing that strikes you most inside the Headstone Tunnel is its immense height and width. Easily enough space for 2 large express trains to pass each other at full steam.
We're right in the middle of the tunnel now. There's a shaft of light at that end, and I can't see anything at the other end. 120 feet of limestone above me. And if you look down here, this is the actual surface that the railway tracks ran on. Come on, Steve. Oh, look at our big shadows. Ooh.
It's hard to imagine a more disused railway line than this. The Headstone Tunnel is a ghostly relic of one of the country's main lines, a giant structure that symbolises the Beeching era.
Oh, the big doors at the other end. I'm quite pleased to see these, actually.
Let's see what we've got.
Now, what can I expect?
Well, we're going to emerge 80 feet above the river.
Ah, cool. Don't look at the light. A completely different landscape. Well, Steve, thank you for my sneaky little walk through the tunnel. And thank you for leaving me at such a magnificent point as well. It's truly beautiful here, isn't it?
For 100 years, this was the moment when trains from London would have burst out from the darkness, with passengers enjoying one of the most extraordinary stretches of line in the country. But it's the view looking down on the viaduct that has become one of the most famous images of Britain's lost rail empire.
That pub was built originally for the railway workers, but of course there aren't many of those left to keep it going anymore, are there? Now, it's like the Peak District's honey trap for tourists and photographers and walkers. I've been there many times myself. Not a bad spot.
As with so many industrial developments, though, this view wasn't always held in such regard. John Ruskin, poet, author, and general social critic of the 1800s, once moaned that the valley is gone and the gods with it, and now every fool in Buxton can be in Bakewell in half an hour, and every fool in Bakewell at Buxton. To be fair to Ruskin, though, with the tracks gone, there's a strange romance and beauty about the mellowed remains of the railway. From the flat-bottomed valley of Monsaldale, the railway soon runs into one of the old industrial centres of the Peaks. Cressbrook is dominated by the enormous buildings of the old cotton mill. At the peak of its output, workers were brought into Cressbrook on the railway, some arriving each week all the way from St Pancras.
You can still make out the bell on the top of the building, but it rather looks as if yesterday's factory has been turned into today's Peak District plush apartment complex.
The factory relied, of course, on the power of the River Wye, and whilst the railway disappears into another long tunnel, there's a chance for me to take a trip down to the water's edge.
Now, I thought this would be the most appropriate place to meet the person who brought me here in the very first place. So here's my dad. Hello, Dad.
Hello, daughter. Nice to see you.
So when did we first come here?
Well, I first came here because I was born here, in Tideswell, just 3 miles away. But you first came when you were 4 or 5.
And what was I like as a young... Because that must be a pain.
You were rather independent. Occasionally you'd tamely follow me. Other times we were walking down a dale and you'd be up on the cliff top.
Strange.
Waving and saying, hello, here I am, you know.
What is it about Derbyshire? What is it about this neck of the woods?
I mean, the Peak District is just one of those places where you want to walk. For most people, it is the easiest place to reach to if you're in Manchester or Leeds or Sheffield.
Now, trout.
Trout.
Trout. Let's talk a little bit of trout. What's so special about this river in particular, though? Why do the trout love it so much?
Well, the Wye is one of the great limestone rivers of the Pennines. You know, there's a huge waiting list to fish this bit of river, partly because it's such a fine river, partly because you've got the cachet of the Duke of Devonshire's ownership around here, and it is just a great place to fish.
I go on and on quite a lot about my first trout tickling experience with you.
Yes. I hasten to say that was in a small stream far away from the bailiffs in the Hope Valley.
Of course, we don't encourage trout tickling.
Absolutely not. No. I say, but in any event, you need to be in small streams where the trout can't run too far away. Here, they've got too much escape.
And can you remember that? I remember it vividly, my first trout tickling moment.
Touching your first trout gently under the gills is like touching your first woman. It's smooth, soft, sometimes slippery, but very exciting.
I can't believe my dad has just said that. Right, I'm going to carry on walking.
Thank you again for seeing me. Lovely to see you. Yeah. Bye-bye.
As you head around the large basin at Cressbrook, The path takes you right down to the water's edge. The Wye Valley tightens dramatically as you follow the river upstream. Gone are the surrounding meadows of Monsaldale, replaced by narrow ledge paths and vertical cliff walls.
This is a bit of a strange place, and it's got a bit of a strange name as well. It's called Water Come Jollydale. And it's strange because it's completely calm here. The air is calm, the water is calm, and listen to the bird song. It's almost like a sort of a tropical mangrove.
As this riverside section of my walk comes to a close, you reach a second cotton mill at Lytton. But this one had a very different reputation to Cressbrook. One child apprentice here said that he'd rather see his own child shipped to Australia than work in such a factory. This comment of harrowing industrial hardship is said to have been the inspiration for Dickens' Oliver Twist.
Stepping off the railways gives you a real sense of how this part of Derbyshire has changed over the past 200 years. Both Lytton and Cressbrook owe their very existence to the once thriving cotton industry, but today they're well-maintained, incredibly quiet pin-up villages. And of course, in those 200 years, the railways have been and gone.
With no trains, no cotton mills, and a large number of second homes, the Wye Valley is an altogether more peaceful place today than it has been for centuries. And as I reach the next station on my route, there would have been yet another industry to contend with: limestone. The old lime kilns, once served by the trains, are still clearly visible. One reason why Millersdale Station was the biggest on this stretch of line.
Hi, Alistair. Nice to see you. Yeah,
Shall I lead the way and look at the view up here?
absolutely.
And this is where I've arranged to meet Alistair Lofthouse, a local publisher who's been given access to the lifetime's work of a genuine Midland Railway fanatic. Many of the black and white images you'll have seen in this programme come courtesy of the late Ray Morton.
So this is the man himself.
Yep, that's Ray, and that's his grandson, Jonathan.
He was a true railway anorak, wasn't he?
Yes, I think so.
We've come to this particular spot because there's a great picture that really shows the then and the now.
Yeah, this is Millersdale Station, which was the biggest station on the line. It had 5 platforms. And we can see the station as it was, the 2 viaducts.
Look at that.
And this is probably the 1950s.
Might seem like a silly question, but why 2 viaducts?
Well, originally there was only 1, but by 1900 the line was getting so busy they needed to increase capacity. So around 1903 they built a second viaduct to allow the freight trains, which are getting more and more, to pass the express trains.
Ironically, the older of the 2 viaducts at Millersdale is in far the best condition today. The newer one is still owned by Railtrack, and its long-term future seems uncertain.
It makes me tingle a bit for a few seconds.
Over the course of 35 years, Ray Morton provided a complete historic record of the Midland Railway, firstly in black and white, then in colour. But Millersdale was clearly a favourite spot for him. Not just the express locomotives, but lowly freight trains pulling wagons away from the massive lime kilns. And then, as the mid-60s arrived, he documented the slow decline and degradation of a line now earmarked for closure.
This is one of my favourite pictures. The old enamelled signs, which today's will be worth a fortune.
Yeah, we need to try and track those down.
Yes. And we've got the old train completing the British Rail green. The only things left, of course, are the wall over there, the railings.
The railings. And all of this glass canopy, of course, that we can see in the shot.
It's all gone.
Well, I love that. That's one of my favourites. Thank you, Alistair.
No problem.
It's been really lovely.
And so to the final and most dramatic stretch of the Monsell Trail. The hill of Cheetor means another locked tunnel. And so the trail takes its second diversion off the railway. And from the air, well, you can see that it's quite an adventure.
See, I quite like being pushed off the path because it gives you the chance to have a little adventure and also to appreciate the engineering that goes into building a railway through this really complex landscape. And as you can see, the viaducts these days have got another really good use, a bit of an abseiling hotspot. And that looks like fun.
Cheedale is for me one of the very best spots in Derbyshire. A river walk through a classic valley that culminates in a full-blown gorge. Terrible for an intercity railway, ideal for a walker.
You know, I said at the beginning that the good thing about railway walks is that they're long and flat and straight. Well, I'm happy to say that I've had 2 little climbs on this one, and that is the cause of the second diversion.
This short stretch of the Midland Railway was undoubtedly the most ambitious and complex in the whole of the company's network. In the space of 6 miles, it went through 6 tunnels and crossed the River Wye 6 times. Walking along the route today, you can't help but admire the determination there must have been to add this route to the Midlands portfolio. And having built the thing, it's staggering that it lasted just 100 years. But one line does remain in the area. It's a freight line, serving the modern limestone quarries nearby. It still occupies the route of the Midland Railway from this point on, and means that walkers like myself never quite make it to the spa town of Buxton. Instead, the Monsell Trail ends here, at Blackwell Mill, a junction where trains once thundered all around, heading to London, Manchester or Buxton.
It's quite fitting that my walk should end here, surrounded entirely by the Midland Railway. In its past, it supported ducal estates, agriculture and industry. It expanded spa towns and improved communications across England. But for me and many walkers, this old railway that ploughed its dirty, noisy path through the Peak District has become a doorway for some of Central England's most spectacular countryside.
Britain is a country that owes a great deal to its rail empire. For 100 years, the railways dominated the development of this country, the network that supported a global superpower. But today, our island is home to 10,000 miles of disused lines, a silent network of embankments, platforms and viaducts. For me and many others, they've become a perfect platform for exploring the country on foot.
This week I've come to Wales, to the market town of Dolgellau to be precise, and there in the distance are the southern hills of Snowdonia National Park. Northern Wales tends to conjure up images of mountain scenery, rivers and lakes, which of course are all major tourist attractions. But the railway walk I'm taking today follows a line that was actually built to bring those tourists here in the first place. It promises a surprising history and beautiful scenery, and yet this is one of the quieter corners of Snowdonia. And the railway walk apparently is the only way to fully appreciate it. And of course, I want to find out why. From Dolgellau, my walk today follows the line that once reached out from the West Midlands all the way to the Welsh west coast. It was one of numerous lines that ran across Wales by the end of the 19th century, connecting these remote parts with Birmingham, Manchester and beyond. But in the beaching era of the 1960s, the majority of these routes were deemed surplus to requirements and disappeared from the map. I'm going to head downstream for a few minutes and find the old railway track bed, but you can see that ancient road bridge. In fact, on the other side of that ancient road bridge is where the railway station used to be. Nothing at all left now. The cars and lorries of the Dolgellau bypass now rush past where the railway once stood. But in 1867, this was where two railway empires met head-on. The race to control a route to the Welsh coast saw the English Great Western Railway build a line through Wales as far as here. But it was the much smaller Cambrian Railway Company that built the line inland from the coast, the section that I'll be walking today. Before I set off, let's take a closer look at the route. I'll head west out of Dolgellau, following the river and the bypass towards the head of the Mouthach estuary. From here, the old railway makes its own path, across the reed bed and floodplains to meet the River Mouthach at Penminepool Bridge. Now the river really begins to look like an estuary. The railway path hugs the south bank as it follows the corridor through the Welsh hills. Before the estuary mouth, I pass through the slate mining community of Arthog, where tramways once crossed the line, taking the slate down to the waterside. And then there's a long curve as trains once reached the bustling Barmouth Junction, the final landmark before the stunning approach to Barmouth itself. Barmouth Bridge may be man-made, but what finer way could there be to reach the Welsh west coast? Now, there are two things I've learned since I've been in Dolgellau. One is that the history of Welsh railways is slightly complex, and the other one is that the pronunciation of Dolgellau or Dolgellau is a bit of a mystery wrapped in a riddle. So I'm going to meet someone who's going to clear it up for me, and she's from Lancashire. When she's not preoccupied with her bed and breakfast business overlooking the Mouthach, Jackie O'Hanlon leads walking and bike tours of the estuary, and of course all of them make use of Dolgellau's old railway line. So Jackie, Dolgellau, and I don't know why I'm asking you from Lancashire, but you've been here for a while now, so you've heard all different pronunciations.
Yes, it's either Dolgellau when you ask people how it's pronounced, that's the very Welsh way,
yep.
Or Dolgellau is also right, and people will mix between the two just when you think you've got it. They'll use the other one just to keep
right, so there is
toes.
no right or wrong, really?
There's a definite wrong if you go Donegaloo.
Donegaloo, yes, good.
But there's two rights.
What on earth is a woman from Lancashire doing here?
We'd heard about the scenery, how beautiful it was, the beautiful biking that's here, the walking that's here. The estuary, to be honest, was a big surprise at how spectacular that was, and it's absolutely beautiful, hidden away, and it's a lovely place to live, and it's nice to share that with people and introduce them to a bit more about the area.
Now, here we are in this very picturesque setting, and we're about to cross over, aren't we, actually, to where the railway begins?
Yes, this is where we cross the river, and from the other side of the footbridge is where the actual railway track, where the trail joins the actual railway track.
You've mentioned Barmouth. I mean, that was one of the big reasons for the railway line, wasn't it, to ship the tourists in? But it wasn't all about tourists.
No, there was also, Dolgellau had a very busy web trade, lots of weaving, that went out on the railway lines. Also slate mining along the estuary went out along the railway lines. I think a lot of people don't know how much there was here, actually, because it's beautiful and tranquil and very quiet, and the idea that once it was full of slate quarries and mining and shipbuilding and weaving and everything else, now there's sheep grazing on the mountains, and that's about it.
And what should I keep my eyes peeled for along the way?
The trail takes the south side of the Malvac estuary. All along the north side you'll see the mountains, that's where all the Welsh gold, Clogau mines, we're up there.
Right, might find some.
You'd need to cross the river to find it.
A bit of digging, that's all right.
Indeed, yes. On your left-hand side you'll also see, as well as the remnants of the railway, you'll also see a Penmine Pool Bridge, which is beautiful, and also there's some tank traps from World War II.
Tank traps? Why?
During World War II, they suspected that there may be an invasion coming in through the estuary, and they put blockades in the way to keep the tanks back.
Tank traps? So they don't sound picturesque and pretty in any way?
They're not as bad as you think they might look, actually. They have a certain something about them, but that's what they are. When you encounter them, you'll know what they are.
OK. Jackie's agreed to meet me further down the line to lead me through some of the less well-known landmarks on the estuary. But for now, it's time to cross the River Onion and join the old Cambrian Railway. So this is it. This is where the old track bed used to be. You can't actually make out where it would have come out of Dolgellau there, but you can see, and you can probably hear, the bypass just there, but not for long. The railway origins of my path soon become more obvious. Within half a mile, a distinct embankment appears. Then you're joined by another telltale feature of a railway line. An avenue of trees lining the route as it cuts through the silted-up area of the upper estuary. This is now designated as a site of special scientific interest. An important breeding ground for wetland birds and a varied environment of salt marsh, swamp, and perfectly flat grazing grounds. Now, that might look like a field in front of me, but in fact, it is the largest reed bed in Wales, quite boggy underfoot. But follow my finger through to the village there, and that's where the two rivers meet, the River Malvac and the River Onion. And then the eye travels into the valley to the right-hand side, and you should be able to smell gold, because that's where a lot of the Welsh gold mining industry took place. The rush for Welsh gold in this area started in the 1860s, the same decade as the railway's arrival. Since then, the industry has grown and shrunk repeatedly, with the most recent activity ending in 1998. The northern side of the Malvac estuary has produced some of the most prized and highly valued gold in the world. And to this day, British royal weddings are usually topped off with a ring made of Welsh gold. Ah, I can spy the toll bridge at Penmine Pool. There she is. Pretty obvious landmark. Since 1879, the wooden bridge has served as a permanent crossing of the estuary, connecting the railway station at Penmine Pool with the north side of the estuary and the gold mining industry. So if it's 60p for a car, what is it for Bradbury?
Double.
£1.20. That's still a bargain. What is it to walk over?
20p to walk. It goes to pay for that.
Maintenance.
The repairs and the paint.
The bridge replaced a ferry service here, but of course it provided one more obstacle to a shipping industry already being overrun by the railway.
You don't have to be an expert to notice the signs of a railway station at this point of the walk. Firstly, there's the signal box in the cream and brown colours of the Great Western Railway. Then there's a very familiar-looking station building and an immaculately maintained signal. Penmine is a brief snapshot of the past, topped off by the centuries-old George Hotel. It's a favourite with locals and somewhere that I'm meeting an unlikely railway double act.
Come along, let's have a look at some paintings and have a chat.
Keith Davis and Des Thomas have known each other for a number of years now. One's English, one is Welsh. One's an artist and one's a former train driver. But the important thing is Keith's passion for accurately painting the past.
How long have you actually been based here as an artist, Keith?
About 7 years, 2001. Through many hours of going through the archives, looking information on the railway, etc. I managed to find Des that worked and lived here, which was fantastic, because to talk to somebody makes it all come to life.
So when was this painting?
It's 1960, dated 1960, with the Foxcote Manor, which is running at Llangollen now, all restored.
So Des, how have things, I mean now, when you look at Keith's painting, when you look at that picture, how real is it to you? How much does it bring back to you?
Well, it's actually like being on it. And I probably was on that train. It's, driver's on this side, the fireman's on the other side.
Yeah.
And all you do is open the regulator and sit down and watch it go.
That was it?
Yes.
Easy?
look at the scenery and enjoy yourself.
So Des, let's talk a little bit about your career. How old were you when you started on the railways?
About 15.
About 15. And what was the first job?
Cleaner.
Cleaner?
You've got to go through the stages, like,
Yeah.
like every other trade, apprentice upwards till you become a driver.
And how long, do you think, from start to finish before you became a driver?
Oh, I'd say about 12 to 15 years.
And what did you feel when you were told for the first time? In fact, where were you when you were told that the railways were going to close?
Well, we were in the sheds there. The foreman of the shed received letters to say that Dr. Beeching had arrived and he was going to close the line. I'm not very happy.
No. It must have been sad and shocking news for you.
It was. When the railways closed, everything else was rapidly closing down. The wool factories, they didn't last very long afterwards. They closed them down. Shops shut. Nothing there, was there?
What did you think of Mr. Beeching himself, or Dr. Beeching?
I'll pass on that.
And can you remember your last day working on the railways?
Yes. We had to take the last little tanky engine, which worked the local train. We had to take that back to Machynlleth. And we were hooting the whistles all the way there and back. Really sad time. Then we had to travel home by bus, and that was the end of us. End of the railway.
Leaving the pub, you pass the site of old sidings and a handful of buildings that once served the station and the line. Then you pass through a cutting, once blasted through this finger of hillside to create a flat and direct route for the railway.
All right, I know they're lambs, and I know it's the time of year, but I've never heard such noisy sheep. They won't shut up. Of course, it's no surprise when you walk along old railway tracks that the path is excessively long and straight.
For over 3/4 of a mile, the embankment stretches out across the sands of the estuary. The valley may look wide and unthreatening, but flash floods have been a feature here for centuries. As recently as 1976, one such flood helped the creation of this path today, as it washed away much of the rocky ballast left behind by the railway. But your reward for this straight trudge is a view that you won't find on any other rail line in the country.
And there's the first sighting of Barmouth Bridge in the distance. reflecting in the water, just a thin line from here. Must be about 4 miles away. For much of the rest of the walk, Barmouth Bridge becomes a teasing goal, regularly disappearing from view, then reappearing moments later, just a little bit closer as the railway hugs the line between the hillside and the estuary. Well, it's nice to get off the track and go off-piste for a while. And from here you get the most magnificent view of Barmouth Bridge proper for the first time. And it really is enormous. It's about half a mile long. Just think, the Victorians didn't even have to get off the train to soak in this view. That rather grand-looking building over there is Caerdion Hall. And in fact, apparently the whole of the North Bank is littered with big fat houses built by wealthy Victorians. And Caerdion Hall itself was a bit of a literary haven. Tennyson, Ruskin, Darwin, even my mate Wordsworth from the Lakelands would come and hang out here for some estuary inspiration. The Mouthack Estuary has certainly not been short of promoters in the past. The Great Western Railway advertised the trip to the Welsh coast as one of the most enchanting in the world. And it was Ruskin, certainly no great lover of railways in general, who once expressed the view that the only walk better than the one from Barmouth to Dolgellau was the walk from Dolgellau to Barmouth. Without the old railway line here, you wouldn't be able to do this, to walk straight through the estuary. You can see it clearly here on both sides. And I love these old telegraph poles. The bits of railway furniture, if you like, left from the good old days. The only bits. Whereas the north side of the estuary was defined by its mining industry, the south side that the railway line hugged was more agricultural, and there's still some stunning farms today. But as you approach Arthog, and as Jackie suggested, this bank hasn't always been a place of peace and tranquility. Aha, now these must be the World War II remains that Jackie was telling me about, because I'm fairly certain that this concrete doesn't date back to Victorian times. I'm also fairly certain, looking at them, that they would have done a very good job at stopping tanks getting past. Sturdier than my Greek grandmother. Sorry, but... As you approach the tiny mining village of Arthog, it's difficult to imagine a place less likely to witness a major invasion. This quiet collection of cottages owes its existence to the slate mining in the area. And from the air, it's impossible not to notice the crater left behind by the local industry. Today, it seems as quiet as the rest of the village. But nothing could be quite as sleepy as the remains of Arthog Station. Jackie, hello again. Well, it's not much of a station, is it?
No, there's not a lot left.
I was expecting a bit more, I must say.
Yes, you're standing where the platform would have been.
Right.
And the trail would have gone along there.
Yeah.
And this is it. It was all made of wood and there's not a lot survived.
Would the station have been built for tourists? Not here.
No, not here. This station was built to support the slate quarrying. All along here were slate quarries. You can still see the heaps and the cottages where the quarrymen would have lived.
Right.
And this station was built to support that, take it out to Barmouth and then beyond.
Now we're quite close to the water here, which I mean I know now it floods, and presumably it would have done back in the good old days as well.
It would have flooded then. There is a story, who knows if it's true, about the station master for this station clinging on during the floods to his station until the water subsided and he was able to survive by holding on to his timber-built station.
Yes, which probably washed away parts of it. Right, we've done Arthog. What else are we going to see up here?
We're going to see some more World War II remains.
Ah, because I've just seen the tank traps back there. So there's more.
There's more up this way.
More concreteness.
Yes, this is the remains, part of the remains of the World War II Marine Training Camp that was here, Camp Iceland, one of a number of marine training camps in this area. There was one over the hill, Camp Burma, where my grandpa trained in the war.
And what were they all training for, the Marines around here?
Reputedly training for the D-Day landings.
And your grandpa was one of them?
He was, yes.
The presence of so much activity here in the 1940s is a surprise to me, and I'm sure to many other visitors to the area. But there was one reason why Marines came to this spot outside Arthog in particular. In 1894, a Cardiff entrepreneur by the name of Solomon Andrews had thought he could turn this waterside spot into a tourist destination to rival Barmouth. He came here with grand plans to develop villas and transport facilities. His dream barely got off the ground, but it did leave the Marines with enough facilities to set up their training base.
But it didn't take off as a resort?
It didn't take off as a resort, no.
Why not?
I don't know. They had problems with subsidence, they had problems with flooding, and it never really came. It was the Marines, now it's the RAF training this area.
Yeah. All the time.
Do you want to see that?
Yeah, let's go and look at the houses. So these are the posh bits that Solomon Andrews built?
Yes, these are the houses that he built for part of his resort that were then made use of by the Marines training camp. They had all of the first floor with doors adjoining so they could get from one end to the other without having to come outside.
Right.
And half of the ground floor, some of the residents stayed in the ground floors of their houses and the Marines made use of the rest of it.
And we can't go in there obviously now, it's all private.
We can't go in there, no, the footpath goes around this way.
With Jackie's help, it's time to head back to the railway and the final station en route to the coast.
Looks like we're on another railway track.
It does. This is a tramway that was put here. Solomon Andrews made use of tramways all in this area for providing the building materials for his holiday resort, and also the idea to use it to bring people in and out.
The visitors.
The visitors.
the visitors that never came.
The visitors that never came. This would connect his resort that we've already seen to the railway station that we're going to go and see.
All right.
1 mile short of Barmouth, my old railway path meets with an active railway. In an area that lost so many of its major rail arteries to Dr. Beeching's axe, the Welsh coastline was fortunate to survive. And today it does feel eerily quiet.
Yeah. This used to be a platform of what was then Barmouth Junction Station.
Yeah.
It was a very busy station in its day.
Yeah.
The lines between Dolgellau and the Cambrian coast on our right, and the Cambrian coastlines over to our left, siding here.
So it was big, it was a big junction.
It was a big junction, yes, it had 5 platforms. So the only ones in Wales that were bigger were Swansea and Cardiff.
And what's it called now, because it's not Barmouth Junction anymore?
Now it's called Morfa Mawddach.
Say that again?
Morfa Mawddach.
Morfa Mawddach. So Jackie, this is where we part ways, I'm heading there.
Yes, enjoy your walk over the Barmouth Viaduct.
I will, thank you very much. Thank you for all your information.
No problem.
I've lived and learned today.
Okay, enjoy your walk.
Thank you.
Bye.
There's another tramway, but to be honest, by now all of your attention is just focused straight up ahead on Barmouth and the bridge.
And so to the last bit of my walk, which is shared with the quiet, but definitely still active coastal line. Opened in 1867, this viaduct, known simply as Barmouth Bridge, is the longest in Wales. It was one of the final and most complex pieces of the link connecting England and the Welsh coast at Barmouth.
It was high-tech too, featuring a sliding section at the northerly end that would allow ships to pass through. At 2,292 feet long, the bridge is made up of 113 timber spans and an 8-span iron section. Each iron column had to be sunk 120 feet below sea level through layers of silt and mud to find the rock floor below. So here I am, smack bang in the middle of the Malthag estuary with a view that carries you all the way back to Dolgetha. But I might not have been here at all, because if you look back through the newspaper archives, you'll know that in 1980 this bridge was actually closed. It was riddled, infested with shipworm. Now luckily it was treatable with worm-proof, glass-reinforced cement. Try saying that after a pint at the end of a long walk. Shipworm. The original sliding metal gate mechanism may have been immune to ship's worm, but it took 37 minutes to open and close, so it wasn't a massive success. 100 years ago, it was replaced with this more conventional swing bridge. But even this hasn't swung open now for over 20 years. So with Barmouth ahead, this is it. The end of the line that once brought fashionable people from England all the way to the Welsh west coast. And as I've seen today, those visitors of the late 19th century are just one of many developments that this stretch of water has witnessed in recent centuries. It's quite funny that here we are in the most Welsh part of Wales, the national language is commonly spoken, and yet this town is known by the frightfully English name of Barmouth, when it's got a perfectly good Welsh name of Abermawr. Just goes to show that those Victorian railway tourists have certainly left their mark, haven't they? Despite the railway, and the mining, and the quarrying, and the shipping, and all the millions of visitors to Snowdonia every year, today I found a little stretch of water here in Wales, and I think it's one of their better kept secrets. Till now.